Brandon Thurston from WrestleNomics is up next, and we're going to follow Brandon with John Pollock from Post Wrestling.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone.
But we can't ignore the math, okay? We can't ignore the data.
Go on Google Trends, type in your name, then type in mine. You're a straight line, I'm a pyramid.
I like the very direct question on that.
Television ratings, downward spiral. Buy rates, plummeting.
The time is now to turn the math around.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Pollock and Thurston here on May the 28th. I am John Pollock from Post Wrestling, joined by the man behind WrestleNomics himself, Brandon Thurston. Hello, Brandon.
Hi, John. It's busy.
It's a busy day. We have a lot on the docket today to get to. We are going to be getting into Triller trouble. Nothing like SEC filings that immediately light up Brandon's inbox and his eyes when he sees those letters in that particular order. We're also going to be talking about, you might have heard, WrestleMania. Get ready, New Orleans. It's coming at a date to be determined. We will dissect that.
Money in the Bank. Money in the Bank is coming to New Orleans. That is the headline.
Yes. The question was how much money was in the bank before New Orleans realized they were not getting WrestleMania next year. But off the top, we are going to be talking about a significant development in the Janel Grant case that was released this morning. Brandon Thurston here has a exclusive statement from the parties, and I'm just going to read from Brandon's story that you can read in full up at postwrestling.com, that a new filing was submitted on Wednesday revealing that WWE's former executive, John Laurinaitis, has been removed as a defendant in the lawsuit filed by former WWE employee Janel Grant, WWE and its former CEO and chairman, Vince McMahon, as well, defendant in this case with WWE. And the statement that they have provided reads as follows, quote, John Laurinaitis has agreed to cooperate and provide evidence in Janel Grant's lawsuit against Vince McMahon and WWE. His agreement to a confidential settlement is a pivotal next step toward holding McMahon and WWE accountable and bringing justice to Ms. Grant after years of sexual abuse and trafficking. Mr. Laurinaitis looks forward to moving on with his life. We cannot provide any additional details at this time. And this was a joint statement. We will note that Ed Brennan, the legal representation for John Laurinaitis, did confirm to Brandon as well. So this is a pretty significant event, and this is not the first time that John Laurinaitis has switched allegiances in this case. And I think that is going to draw a lot of attention here, that this was somebody that was named as a defendant, then it appeared was going to be working with Grant's side, and then got fully behind Vince McMahon in this case around a year ago this time, and now is reaching this settlement to have his role as a defendant removed in order to present evidence to Janel Grant's team. Yeah.
So, and what's alleged against John Laurinaitis in this lawsuit is very serious. Grant alleges that he participated in sexual assault against him as well as Vince McMahon. Now, it's important to note that there appears to be some sort of agreement between the two sides here, and he has been removed with prejudice. With prejudice means that Grant can't bring these claims back. It suggests that there's been a pretty strong agreement here, and what they say is that Laurinaitis has agreed to cooperate with evidence, and evidence is becoming important in these legal issues surrounding Janel Grant, because we know that we're waiting now. By June 13th, the defendants who remain, which are WWE and Vince McMahon, are expected to refile their motions to compel arbitration to try to get this out of public court and into a private process where there would not be public filings, and the conditions might favor the defendants. And we expect those again by June 13th. However, the judge did rule that Janel Grant is allowed to request discovery related to this arbitration issue itself. The arbitration issue is that there's an arbitration clause that's part of the $3 million NDA that Janel Grant and Vince McMahon signed. Will it be enforced or not is the big legal question. So she's going to be allowed to request evidence. We'll see how that unfolds. She has also prevailed in Dr. Carlin Kolker's motion to dismiss their separate state lawsuit. So she's going to be able to get evidence in that case as well. Maybe that will be relevant too.
Yeah, there's a few factors that come up from this. One of which is that when we saw the initial complaint and further with the amended complaint has always been the text that Vince had sent that were very damning in terms of Vince McMahon's characterization in all of this. And we have heard like the talk of, well, if you saw these full messages in context with what was being said back and forth, this would I'm not going to say paint Vince McMahon in a stronger light, but everything you have heard is that, well, Vince McMahon did not hold on to these text messages. Those do not exist. And a big question in all of this is, well, what text would exist on the John Laurinaitis side that he was in correspondence with Vince McMahon and Janel Grant as well? But further to that, random thought is just how you assess John Laurinaitis' credibility in this whole entire thing. Like this is one where like you look for like a plausible, like this is John Laurinaitis making sure that he is taking care of John Laurinaitis. And it has been very transparent over this period since January of 2024 that he is willing to align himself with the party that is going to get him off the stage of this entire civil case. And he has apparently been able to do so. But I think it also comes with like questions about, his character and all of this as well in terms of being a credible witness.
And the timeline is, so this lawsuit was filed in January 2024. Then a few days later, John Laurinaitis, through his attorney, gave the statement to Vice News saying that he's a victim too of Vince McMahon. So it looked like he would be on Grant's side going forward. But then just a few months later, in May 2024, he came out with another statement saying he corroborates Vince McMahon's, denials and that these are unfounded allegations. And since then, until today, we've seen things like Vince McMahon file motions to compel arbitration and make other legal filings where the Laurinaitis side just sort of made much simpler filings, basically to say, yeah, I'm on board with what the defendants are saying here. So maybe
which let's just say the timeline, as recently as February 21st is when the defendants, including John Laurinaitis, had filed these motions to oppose Janel Grant's amended complaint. So, I mean, this is a development that has occurred in, at most in the last 3 months, this switch for launch.
I think it's worth noting that we saw like full filings from WWE on motions to compel, saw full filings from McMahon on motions to compel, and what Laurinaitis filed, I believe, are called joinders. So it's just a very simple filing, as if to say, yeah, I'm on board with what they're saying. Yeah.
So, I mean, it is left to speculation about like what kind of deal Laurinaitis was able to craft for himself, the key being that he is no longer a defendant in this case and what evidence he brings forth. But again, as we're going to end every discussion about this case, it's Judge Sarah Russell that has the ultimate, she will dictate where this case goes, regardless of who is on Janel Grant's side or not. But this does, in theory, present a lot of possible evidence that Janel Grant's team is now privy to through John Laurinaitis, and that he is on this side of the fence against the defendants.
Right. She's going to be able to request evidence. There very well may be disputes about what evidence she's allowed to get, and in terms of the defendants trying to minimize what kind of evidence she can obtain. We should mention too, there's this shareholder lawsuit, a total separate action, one of Vince McMahon's many legal actions, the shareholder lawsuit, which now does not involve WWE as a defendant, but it is against Vince McMahon and various other members of the board at the time of the TKO merger. Anyway, what's happening in that case is the plaintiffs, who are shareholders, are trying to get any communications records from Vince McMahon that are related to the sexual misconduct allegations, and he's trying to limit the sexual misconduct allegations communications records to be only from between himself and the board members who were helping make the decision about whether TKO, who WWE was going to merge with. Unclear if that evidence could help Grant's case, but it seems possible. Yeah,
and you had written about the fact that Vince McMahon is accusing the plaintiffs of harassing and pressuring him in order to move into discovery and give up more than you're in, which I'm sure is not too uncommon, is defining what you would merit as reasonable for the discovery process. That, there is going to be that gray area of, obviously, the plaintiff side. They want as much information as possible, but where do you draw the line here of where this is relevant to a shareholder lawsuit? It's this tangled web that ultimately that there is, the courts have to make this decision of like what is prudent to this specific case, and if it oversteps the reach that discovery should be the forum for.
And if I can try to put a fine point on what the disagreement is here, this is not a lawsuit in specific about the misconduct allegations. This is a lawsuit about allegedly Vince McMahon predetermining the process that led to him making a deal with his friend Ari Emanuel to merge UFC Endeavor's asset and WWE. That's what the plaintiffs allege, and that's what Vince is really pointing to say, you don't need communications with, for example, my family members that I may have had about the misconduct allegations. All you need are communications about the misconduct allegations included with members of the board who are also involved in making the decision about the merger. The plaintiffs say that, no, we want all of this communications related to the misconduct allegations because it's important for us to understand what your thought process, what your motives were going into the merger and acquisition process.
Yeah, such as Endeavor and Ari Emanuel stating as much in the CNBC interview right after the merger was announced, that it was necessary for Vince McMahon to be part of this merger process. And if that swayed Vince McMahon in terms of finding a partner that was going to allow him to make that transition to the new company, as opposed to maybe one that is more valuable on paper, but would not have a seat for a Vince McMahon, that they would feel he is a detriment to this company's plan to move forward and attach to these allegations.
Right. And the plaintiffs would say that there was no other company that was going to allow Vince to have as prominent a role as he had in TKO for several months anyway, before he resigned.
Yes. Well, let's shift gears now. And I hope everyone did not book their flights yet. I hope no one had a non-refundable hotel because that's going to take us to our next story.
We're going to make it official right now in front of the world. Next year, 2026, WrestleMania 42, live from the Superdome in one of the greatest cities on earth, New Orleans, Louisiana.
Hey, it's the Game Triple H. I'm sure everyone saw our joint statement yesterday regarding the shift in some of the dates on the WWE calendar. Stay tuned for more details on a WrestleMania coming to New Orleans, which will be announced at a later date.
The Rock is the final boss, thinking 20 steps ahead. So the best thing for them to do is to know their role, shut their mouth, and enjoy the ride that The Rock is taking them on.
Enjoy that ride. We just don't know what the destination is yet. Odds are your flight will be aimed towards the West Coast in Las Vegas for WrestleMania. Is that the closest Paul Levesque has ever come to promoting WrestleNomics on a WWE piece of media?
How did he almost promote WrestleNomics?
Well, I never saw WWE put out this statement on any of their platforms until Paul Levesque acknowledged this. So I don't know where I first saw that statement was from you, Brandon, and then everyone
should
went
we
from there.
Walk through how I learned that WrestleMania would not be taking place in New Orleans next year. I was given a tip that suggested that this is the case, that New Orleans was not going to be the home of WrestleMania next year, despite the announcement by The Rock.
Can you give an estimate of like when you first heard about that? Like how far back we're going, like a week or two?
Not that many days before the story was reported. Maybe under a week. I was told this, and so I asked the various parties who were involved, all of the local organizations who may have been involved in this, as well as it was suggested to me that Las Vegas could be where this ended up, and I was asking Las Vegas as well. I got no response at first. This was over a weekend, and so I followed up and sort of pointed out that there's a lot of people with travel plans that may be in place will be potentially thousands of people who may be affected by this in terms of they've already booked hotels and flights and things like that. And then sort of out of the blue, what was it, Thursday? I got a statement from the Greater New Orleans Sports Foundation in conjunction with New Orleans and Company, which is this tourism organization in New Orleans. And they said that this is a joint statement from them and WWE saying that Money in the Bank is coming to New Orleans. And it looks like WrestleMania will not be taking place in New Orleans next year. And I immediately called John Pollock and said, I think I've got a story here. I think I've got to report this. So
the response was, I think you absolutely do. I couldn't believe how clear they had made it here on paper.
So I did reach out to W a number of times to try to confirm that they were on board with this joint statement. Didn't necessarily doubt that the Greater New Orleans Sports Foundation was just saying that they made an agreement with WWE about this statement when they didn't. But I needed, you got to confirm that the other side is really down with this statement, and I didn't get a response. The next day, I sent them a number of emails, and then the next day I asked them if they would just simply confirm it. Still got no response. And then a couple hours later, we got this video from Paul Levesque. So I don't know if this is a video that was propelled by my questions, but at least we got a confirmation that WWE did agree to this joint statement.
Yeah, this is the video that Wei Ting dubbed the hostage video.
Yes.
This was the least conversational, natural-sounding Paul Levesque I have ever heard, and yeah, it was interesting just from like this side of things to watch how WWE reacted and handled this news. That was, I mean, this is kind of like at a core level the push and pull of the 2025-26 version of WWE / TKO. It is value versus fan response of satisfying your audience, and this was one that you very clearly saw that dichotomy at stake here of not just rumors or online reports of where WrestleMania would be next year. No, we had probably our most visible figure on SmackDown announcing this and made very clear these are the dates, this is when we're going to New Orleans, and creating that reaction for that city and people that I know personally, like Davey Portman in our crew he had already booked like accommodations for New Orleans next year, and I'm sure he was not alone. We had a story about how this affects like WrestleCon, for instance, that they have a contract for a location next year that they might not be able to get out of. It's a huge ripple effect, and the reporting suggests that the Greater New Orleans Authority, they got word of this on Thursday, that officially they were moving WrestleMania and punting it to a future year, and in its absence will be Money in the Bank next August.
That's what NOLA.com reported, that the Greater New Orleans Sports Foundation was told by WWE on the day, earlier in the day, before it was reported. So before they gave me their statement. But there's really no precedent for this, right? Fake terrorist threats aside in LA in 1991, right, where they went from the stadium to the arena. But to change,
and the pandemic is the closest we've got, really, where they had it in Tampa and had to move to the PC.
I think all the WrestleManias were sort of pushed up 1 year as a result of that. But anyway, reasons for this we can only guess. We don't know that. We don't really have information about that. We do know that Las Vegas did, and Nevada, the state, provided WWE with a lot of money, and in terms of not only a site fee of $5 million, but I believe $4.2 million in addition to that in terms of tax credits, which is something that motion picture and apparently entertainment, including WWE, can apply for, as well as AEW. We saw that with Double or Nothing 2023 or 2024. In any case, you submit some information to the Nevada state government, and you say, I'm going to spend this much money, and you get this much money back in terms of a tax credit. So that's over $9 million in cash.
They also had rent-free use of the convention center where they held the World, and whatever that deal was that they had with the Fontainebleau Hotel to host all of those events. Like I'm sure there was that was a separate deal on top of it. Obviously, Las Vegas was greatly incentivized. You heard, I think beforehand, Mark, and again, economic studies, you can probably do a John Oliver deep dive into these economic studies. But I mean, the figure that WWE was going into WrestleMania citing was an estimate that we would bring $215 million in economic impact. And I'm pretty sure Mark Shapiro said on the last earnings call that it was above that figure. So, I mean, Las Vegas is looking at this as a massive win over Easter weekend, no less, and obviously making it so worth WWE's while that in terms of, hey, you can have the show in 2027. We've got 2026 locked up, but it was enough that they are pulling out of New Orleans. And I mean, do you look
at the connections that the executives have? This is Nick Khan's hometown. This is where UFC headquarters are. It's probably a city that these executives like, or maybe they really appreciated some experiences that they had in terms of running these events there.
Do you feel that this as they are continuing to make such a big push for all of these kinds of deals with different governments, different municipalities, does this at all harm TKO's reputation? Or do you feel that this is a blip on the radar from a business standpoint, just the fact that you had committed here to come to New Orleans, and, you know, the authority figures, their partners that they are working with, I mean, if they are, seething about this, they are certainly not going to voice that because they are still in partnership with WWE and do want to be working with them for the next several years. But this to me would give some places trepidation of, we could have an agreement in place and that is only as good as the next incoming offer. And why are negotiations even taking place for an event that we have publicly announced and probably put like the building blocks in place for, both strategically and financially, a year out?
It's somewhat surprising that they could even viably get out of such a deal. You would think that there was some sort of a written agreement that was executed before this was announced by Dwayne Johnson on international television.
If there was not a promise of a future WrestleMania, which you can debate like the merits of what that promise entails, but if not, like, I absolutely believe like there would have been a lawsuit coming out of this. But I don't think it would behoove anyone in New Orleans, as long as you want to be in business with TKO, to be going about this. And
those economic impact studies might turn out to be a justification for damages. I don't know. It in terms of, does this damage their credibility? I think, when it comes to whether the 2027 WrestleMania is going to be, if it's not in Las Vegas, and you talk with WWE and you make an agreement, I mean, who's to say it's really set in stone and that it's really going to happen? It is questionable. This is WWE's biggest event of the year. It's a pretty big promise to make to a local municipality, and how do I know it's that you're really going to deliver and not back out of it a few months from now? There's a track record.
And looking at the calendar, so we have tentatively Las Vegas next year, which WWE has not officially announced yet.
Correct.
But is the candidate everyone expects. Indianapolis is owed a WrestleMania as part of this 8-year deal that they have with the in Indiana. And I think you also have to look at the fact that after Royal Rumble next year, like where Saudi Arabia fits in terms of going after a big WrestleMania, which from a financial standpoint could trump any of these.
And people want to talk about London still.
Yeah, London was brought up here. I don't see a Mexico WrestleMania occurring anytime soon. But I mean, you look at New Orleans, and it's like, how far down in the pipeline are you? Like they couldn't even give you a year that we are earmarking for WrestleMania. It's like, that seems like that is up in the air too.
Yeah, and as I say, it probably damages their credibility as far as these agreements go. But it's not like they didn't have. It's not like they couldn't have calculated that. I'm sure they calculated that. And as I wrote the other day, like all this, I'm sure, is being thought about, and it's probably worth it. At least they think it's worth it, and it's working out for now, because the TKO stock is performing really, really well year to date, despite all the concerns in the news about tariffs and about a possible economic recession. This TKO stock is well outperforming the S&P 500 and the big indexes. And they've got UFC rights coming up, and they're continuing to sell the idea that they're going to start to make more and more on-site fees. And here we are throwing out the candidates for the upcoming WrestleManias, whether it's London or Saudi Arabia, paying God knows how many, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars they could offer up. It's a negative on one hand, but maybe it's offset.
Well, it's also one where you would think that if if there's anything that jeopardizes New Orleans, it would only be because there's another place that is willing to outspend. Like, that seems to be what the case is. It seems pretty cut and dry in this instance. And for TKO, it's like, okay, well, we have outgrown New Orleans. If we can find greater value in our most lucrative WWE property in WrestleMania, and there's not going to be a shortage of places that want this event and what we can bring. Like, this is WWE and TKO carrying a lot of leverage, and this is like the ultimate display of it, that we will move this and we will dictate the terms of how this goes forward. And if you're New Orleans and you want to be in business with WWE, you're kind of at the behest of these whims, and that, yes, we can make a public announcement and we can also quietly move away from that announcement, even though this Rock video still very prominent on WWE's YouTube channel, as I found a few hours ago.
Yeah. We'll see what happens going forward, but it is a big step to announce this is going to happen, and then a few months later, take it back, as far as what that says about your partner relationships.
Going back to this past weekend, and this follows up on that topic, we got some new data from Pollstar and now we've got a full view of how WrestleMania week performed. And
except for the stadium, except for the big event itself.
We don't have the big one yet, yes.
Which we assume is upwards of maybe $20 million, maybe. But definitely more than the 18 or so million dollars of the biggest day in Philadelphia.
Yeah, so the surrounding shows at the T-Mobile Arena, those are the ones that we do have now. So this included SmackDown the night before the first night of WrestleMania at T-Mobile, with 15,956 tickets sold for a gate of $2.5 million. Stand and Deliver Saturday afternoon, 9,854 paid, and a gate of $924,000. And then Monday, the Raw after WrestleMania, 16,738 paid, $3.48 million gate for Raw.
Yeah, one of the biggest arena gates in pro wrestling history, edged out just weeks earlier by the London Raw, where they made, in US dollars, 3.58, a whole $100,000 more.
That's insane. $7 million for 2 episodes of Raw.
Yeah, it's the ticket prices are going up, and no more C&D house show or domestic house shows whatsoever. But they're and when people talk about, they're complaining about the ticket prices, and they're going really high, as you can see in these gates. But we're not seeing in the WrestleTix data that WrestleTix puts out for every one of these events. I do these reports for every episode of Raw and SmackDown, and I do this chart with the comparisons of, here's the estimate from WrestleTix compared to Raw last time they were in this town, and it's usually up. So it's not like this, higher prices are driving down attendance, or even in most cases stabilizing attendance. Attendance is still oftentimes growing for Raw and SmackDown. So again, you can say there's a negative thing here for sure in terms of asking fans to pay more, but it's not resulting in fewer fans going to the venues yet.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to hear the complaints from like an audience that is obviously being priced out of these events, and that's not an insignificant amount of people. But as long as those fans that are being outpriced are being replaced by fans that will, it's not a concern. And I mean, you can like marvel at this, or you can be in disagreement with it, but this is supply meeting demand, and that's as easy as it gets, and especially for a weekend like this in Las Vegas. And you're looking at these numbers where, a Raw is doing a $3.5 million gate. You can understand why Las Vegas looked at, like, this was a weekend of the year for Vegas that it looks as like just a down weekend in terms of tourism over Easter weekend. And here WWE came in and they performed not just these shows, but all the non-wrestling events that they staged. I mean, Vegas got the roast of WrestleMania on top of it. And then they got 48 hours of news cycles when the audio leaked. I mean, this was a very big billboard for Las Vegas and all surrounding authorities.
Yeah, and we have a few surrounding this time before and after WrestleMania weekend, and we're still seeing, $1.5 million gate for Raw in Fort Worth, Texas on April 25th. In Buffalo, March 3rd, $1.17 million gate. It's just run of the mill for Raw or SmackDown to have a gate of well over $1 million. They did very well in their international tours too, with a $1 million gate in Belfast for a house show, nearly $2 million for SmackDown in, how do you say this, Bologna? Bologna, Italy. $2.6 million for the Raw in Glasgow. We could go on and on here. And just to not to get tribalism going, but if you compare this to some of the data that we do have for AEW, I mean, they're doing, I don't know, in a lot of cases under $500,000 for a gate, to just give us some frame of reference. This is a lot of ticket revenue for a company that just a few years ago was not doing anywhere near this, both in terms of people actually buying tickets and the ticket prices and just the revenues being generated. We say this all at the same time while mentioning, this is not a live event business. This is supplemental. This is a bonus because all the money, the big money, is really coming from media, is coming from Netflix, coming from NBC Universal, maybe a few others at this point. That's where the big money comes from. They would run these events sort of regardless, but they're making great bank at the venues still too.
Let's move on over to some other live event announcements by WWE. They're going to Atlanta, July 12th and 13th. They looked for a clean weekend on the calendar for the professional wrestling industry, and they have booked 3 events in Atlanta, including the NXT Great American Bash on Saturday afternoon from the Center Stage Theater. I guess they want to just play the nostalgic Center Stage venue. Saturday night's main event will follow that evening on NBC from the State Farm Arena, and then Evolution Sunday night also at the State Farm Arena. So looks like WWE has just they've got the weekend to themselves, and wrestling fans can just sit back and catch everything in sequential order.
You may or may not be contractually obligated only to watch WWE, no other form of entertainment. Now there is a big story that we do have to talk about here, which, at a stadium, there is a big entertainment event happening on the same weekend, which is Beyonce. Beyonce coming to the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, going head-to-head with these events. Well, except for on Saturday. They're not going to be there Beyonce is not going to be there on Saturday, but she is going to be there on, I believe, Thursday, Friday, Sunday, and Monday. You can see Beyonce in Atlanta. In addition to that, the Major League Baseball All-Star Week is also overlapping. So a lot of entertainment competition here that WWE is facing.
Well, maybe you can just plan a trip to Texas to get away from pro wrestling that particular weekend. Because as WWE is going all in with their shows in Atlanta, AEW, which had initially announced All in Texas for Saturday night at Globe Life Field, then shifted it to the afternoon to avoid going up against Saturday night's main event. That would be our characterization. I'm sure there's their own reasoning for moving it to
it's going to be an 8-hour show probably, so they don't want to keep people up all night.
It's possible. So this has a 3 p.m. Eastern start time, and it was very interesting, the rollout of this announcement over the weekend, because they promoted NXT Great American Bash, but didn't, in the initial announcement, state the date or time nor venue for the Great American Bash. They only promoted those details for Saturday night's main event and Evolution. So what we do know is the Great American Bash will also start at 3 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday afternoon.
Yes. So I've learned that is the plan, for it to go live on Peacock at 3 p.m. Eastern, which is the same time that All In is scheduled to start. All In is scheduled to start at 2 p.m. Central Time, which is 3 p.m. Eastern. So, not surprising. We knew that it was going to happen sometime earlier in the day before Saturday night's main event, later in prime time. So they will be, at least that is the plan right now, for these two events to go head to head. It's hard to imagine that they wouldn't overlap to some degree.
No, I don't think they'd be running at 11 in the morning to accommodate the AEW show. What do you think about this as a strategy? Like, this is the tool that NXT is being utilized. And like, just taking it anecdotally from this past Sunday, we had Battleground and Double or Nothing head to head with one another. I don't doubt that there is some audience that is
coincidence, right?
There's only so many Sundays of the year that you can plan. How can
no word yet if WWE will be performing a surgical strike on Globe Life Field on Saturday afternoon. I mean, it's clearly intentional.
But, like, is this like enough of a like, if you're WWE and your goal is to dominate the attention span of the wrestling fan over its AEW competitor, like, Like, is NXT the tool you're utilizing for this? Like, versus, putting your main roster show up against it.
I mean, NXT's purpose since 2019 has been to be oftentimes a bulwark for AEW, so that in any scenario, whatever the outcome, if AEW wins, if AEW loses, if AEW wins, no, they just beat NXT. If they were damaged, well, they were damaged by our developmental.
There's also no scorecard and almost no risk in this. Like, it's not like we get a number the next day.
Case,
I don't think people cling to like attendance numbers as like it's really just based on like
in terms of distribution. These are totally different. It's going to be a Peacock broadcast that we're never going to see numbers for, and it's going to be a pay-per-view that will eventually maybe get somebody to report something about.
And that would be the question. Like, if I am Peacock, is this strategy, like utilizing NXT as a weapon for your opposition, is this harming this product that I would be very confident in stating that Battleground, its live viewership was affected, and I would state that the same will be the case at All in Texas. Like, are you getting all of your value out of this NXT product on your service, or do you ultimately, like, the head-to-head is less of a factor now?
What's the viewership impact of going for NXT of going head-to-head with All In? Like, let's say 20%. Let's say it's 50%. Even if it's really harsh, what's the value of that to NBC Universal when we're talking about something that's, it's NXT anyway, so it's not going to be as highly viewed as a main roster event. I feel like it's kind of minimal. And if you're NBC Universal, is there some justification for, like, I want to help you? I mean, certainly they wanted to help NXT go on USA Network in 2019 and go head to head with Dynamite. There was some incentive there that they were agreeable enough with to create the Wednesday Night War. So maybe there is some motivation from NBC Universal to try to help WB compete with its nearest competitor. And I just think that the cost, we're talking about, a fraction of NXT's viewership.
I think the idea is it's low risk, low reward for WWE. I think we're putting our third level brand up against AEW. If we're harmed 15%, so be it. It's like, for instance, and had they decided to program Evolution, like the all women show, head to head with AEW, you would see your timeline explode. Like, there would be so much anger
that was considered
about this, about weaponizing the women's show up against AEW and forcing everybody.
We'll do a women's show, but only to fight the competitor. Yeah.
But I mean, this is sort of where things are at right now. And let's hear from Tony Khan, who was asked about this at the end of Sunday's press conference after Double or Nothing.
How are you feeling about other companies scheduling events on top of and around yours on a consistent basis?
It's pretty consistent. I'd say it's the most consistent event head-to-head scheduling I've seen since Jim Crockett Promotions. Saw a lot of scheduling that went that way. And I can tell you this will go a lot differently than that did, Mark. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, maybe takes us back to those.
What other company was he talking about?
Yeah, it was plural there. I don't know how vicious the NWA and Billy Corgan have been towards counter-programming AEW, but it does seem like one specific company has been doing this. But
I'm always noticing the euphemisms, like, and this happens at W press conferences too. We can't. It would be like swearing to mention the other company. It's similar to what he said a number of years ago now at the Brawl Out press conference, where he said, "I've got a hell of a lot more money than Jim Crockett."
Yeah, he was a lot more calm in this answer than that one that you got that answer out of him from.
I think the question was how did pay-per-view do, and that was the response.
Yeah, he was ready for that one. Did you happen to hear Cody on? Cody's got a new podcast, new wrestling podcast in the space. Him and Brandy, his first guest, started talking about AEW, but it was not referred to as AEW. It was the alternative company.
I'm glad they used a euphemism.
The alternative company.
That would have impacted many people's eardrums if they said AEW. Can't say that.
Double or Nothing did go down this past Sunday. Brandon has watched it front to back. We were going to do a whole match-by-match review, but we're running short on time. But the last number from WrestleTix, 8,179. So I mean by just pure ticket numbers, it's a very healthy one, I would say, for an AEW pay-per-view at this vantage point. But I mean, this is also a show. This was the first time that they took it out of Las Vegas, running in Glendale, Arizona. At least from a critical standpoint, on Cage Match, this is the 4th highest rated AEW event in its history, behind the Brody Lee Tribute Show, the first night of Spring Breakthrough in Boston last month, and All Out 2021, which featured the debut of Bryan Danielson, CM Punk's first match, and also the main event between Will Ospreay and Hangman Page, the 4th highest rated match in the company's history as well. So, I mean, from just a pure critical standpoint, this was an exceptionally well-received show from the Cage Match audience.
Yeah, and I mean, like, we can downplay the degree to which match quality is important, but the fact that these shows are so well-received, it continues to be a really important thing, I think, for their pay-per-view business. I mean, you can see their fan popularity maybe diminish, which it has, but as long as they continue to deliver for the most part, and people watching a video can see where there have been exceptions, such as World's End or even Dynasty, which haven't been as well reviewed, but where people can expect that they're going to see a great, and I've heard very long, pay-per-view, that it's going to be at least worth their $50, and they will continue to come back because they are the bottom of the funnel, and they're hard to drive away, and they're willing to spend $50 to watch a show. This was, I did the math. This was, in terms of total match time, the most match time that there's ever been for an AEW pay-per-view.
Yeah, this was a show that clocked in, I mean, it went off the air around 12:30 a.m. Eastern time. We had, 2 matches that exceeded 35 minutes, but I mean, it's always interesting to look at sort of the reception to these shows, and you try not to get bogged down with the idea that, just pure match quality is going to drive your business. But like, these shows are, I mean, consistently, operating at this level that you put down these $50, you're going to be seeing like just a level that is not being replicated anywhere else in the world. And I think that this show in particular was also greatly enhanced by a very strong build, and largely, I would say, like a positive response to the booking direction in a lot of the key programs, and now setting things up for what will be their biggest show of the year in July as well. Like, there is a strong word of mouth with AEW, and you can see instances of it. I think you can look at several, figures and stats that are pointing in the direction of AEW moving upward, but I don't think you would be overstating things to think that this is a company that is just surging, or it's definitely turned a corner, though, I would say, from last year's low point towards, the final quarter of last year, where it did seem to be a lot of fan dissatisfaction with AEW and its overall identity crisis, and many state of it, the AEW think pieces.
Yeah. Well, we know the TV ratings are a mess. We don't know what to believe about TV ratings anymore. But we do have the cleanest metric that there is still, which is attendance. And Dynamite is 10% down so far quarter to date compared to the same quarter of last year. So we're not seeing attendance recover yet, or even stabilize, really. It is sequentially up in this quarter. We got 3,300 compared to 2,700 in the prior quarter. But seasonality probably should be taken into account. And it is down 10% when you compare it that way. So, I'm not ready to say that AEW's popularity has turned around. Not at all. But I do sense, if we reran the sentiment data for the year to date on Reddit, which I should get around to eventually, I would guess that it's turned back up. Yeah.
As we move on from AEW, they've I'll just add a note that today they started their pre-sale for All Out in Toronto, and this will be taking place September 20th at the Scotiabank Arena. So we will see if they what their return to Canada will generate in terms of I understood that those that were checking in on prices last night, they were they were very much in the vein of TKO, but I guess more reasonably priced tickets out today. So if you had an experience of getting All Out tickets, do let me know. Some of you might not be traveling to Toronto, and your means to watch All Out may be on Triller TV. But what is going on with Triller? This has emerged over Several months, if you've been following Triller's business, and Brandon has done a great job of putting Triller under the microscope, to a company whose stock is now trading at what, 60 cents?
Yes. I have had the Nasdaq ticker open all day today. It is right now, it's back at 61 cents. 61 cents according to Google Finance.
Wait till everyone finds your report.
Yeah, I mean this is a complicated.
What happened
company.
here?
So
what happened?
People should understand. We should mention right away here is that this is not all Triller time. What we're looking at right now, which is for people watching video, is a line chart of the entire stock history, which goes all the way back to mid 2019. Okay, Triller was not inside this company yet. The company that we now know as Triller Group was a SPAC. And everyone knows what a SPAC is, right? A SPAC is basically an empty shell company that goes public, goes through all the trouble of becoming public, and then acquires a company. So it's a really fast way for that outside company to become a public company and raise more money. That's why one would do it, and that is what has happened with Triller. And Triller is not only Triller TV. That's what wrestling fans would be familiar with it, the former Fight streaming service and pay-per-view business. But it is also Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship.
Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship.
It is some sort of social media company. In any case, Triller has been a part of this publicly traded company since October, and there's some concerning SEC filings that have been filed year to date, including showing that they missed filing their annual report, and then they missed filing their first quarter report. You do a quarterly report every quarter except for the end of the year where you file an annual report. So they have missed 2 consecutive quarters where they were supposed to file their financial statements. And then there was something happened in January where they said they were bringing on a $14 million investment from this KPC Holdings, this private equity firm that was going to give them $14 million of investment. And then they said in April, oh wait, that actually didn't happen. We're going to make a $10 million deal. But actually, we haven't gotten the $10 million yet. And I did ask Triller for comments and asked them a number of questions. They didn't get back to me just to make sure that they would get to have their say if they wanted to. All this suggests that they're strapped for cash. They're not filing their financial statements like they're supposed to. The Nasdaq, which is the stock exchange that they're on, has told them that they have to deliver a plan, I believe, by June. If by October they haven't rectified their situation, they may be taken off of the index, which basically the consequence of that is it will be even harder for them to raise money because they won't be on the Nasdaq index, which there's a lot of financial institutions that just can't buy stock, that aren't allowed to buy stock that's not on a stock exchange like the Nasdaq. So all of it suggests that there's some serious financial problems happening here for this company, and we'll see what happens because it's an important partner for AEW and for a wide variety of independent wrestling companies.
Yeah, I mean, last week, if you paid attention, I mean, they made a big push on AEW programming to make it like they had a giant wall of logos of where you could buy the pay-per-view. And it was available on Triller, but not in the U.S., not in Canada, and not in Puerto Rico. It was available internationally on Triller.
And I was told it was available video on demand after.
Okay, then just not the live broadcast.
Right.
And then, also adding Fubo as well.
Yes.
Which was originally announced as Fubu, and I thought that
I always accidentally say Fubu. Yes.
Well, you and Excalibur both. Yes. Yeah, I mean, a world where a Triller goes away, like, there's that impact on AEW, but that's a killer for just a lot of fan accessibility to all of these independent companies. It's like GCW has just got, like, we always talk about, like, can you, like, on a larger scale, a WWE, after you go to the streaming model of trying to put the toothpaste back in, like, that's what a GCW would face here after it's gone from a la carte pay-per-views to now you sign up for Triller TV Plus. And if you're a wrestling fan, the GCW shows are the most consistent hook that you have every single month. Like, you have your AAA shows every now and then. You do have the AEW packages and such, but it's a lot of these smaller indie companies that I'm sure are not generating a ton of business, but for GCW, like to move away from your pay-per-view model, obviously that was a lucrative enough deal for them. And it does bring into question like how they would transition outside of a non-Triller industry.
Yeah, I mean, if this company did completely collapse, maybe there's a valuable asset here in Triller TV that they would be able to sell off, so that maybe Triller TV or whatever it would end up being called would not completely go away. Because it does seem like a business that makes sense, selling pay-per-view and streaming subscription, maybe with a cost that's not, extreme. It seems like a business that makes sense on its own.
Well, we'll continue to follow on the state of Triller TV, and we'll just finish off with a couple more stories here. One that, I mean, it's definitely, there is a story here. What the exact specifics are, there are a lot of rumors out there, but what we have is, going back to March, the announcement of, in theory, what would be TKO Boxing, which they did state would not be the name of this, but ultimately it would be Dana White, Nick Khan, Turki Al-Sheikh that would be putting their vision of boxing. And we had the talk about potentially altering the Ali Act, and this was going to be a big shift towards TKO going headfirst into boxing. And then the announcement came that they would be promoting Terrence Crawford against Canelo Alvarez on September the 12th, which would be a Friday night, originally set for Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. And then it's announced that it's moving to Saturday, September the 13th. Why is that date suspect? Is because that would be head-to-head with UFC's Noche event in Guadalajara, Mexico, which is one of their big pay-per-views of the year. And in theory, Dana White promoting two shows on the same night. And then Turki Al-Sheikh put out this tweet about a week or so ago stating that Sella, which is the Saudi Arabian-based company that is involved in all this, they would be the promoter of this fight happening on September 13th. And Dana White and TKO, they have been radio silent on this issue, but it is a larger question of what exactly is the relationship between Turki Al-Sheikh with TKO vis-a-vis Dana White, and what is their involvement with TKO Boxing? Is this just, we're going to promote this card on our own, TKO's not involved, but we still have our plans that we're just moving towards 2026? There's a lot of questions here, but this has the potential to be a very big story if it at all is hinting towards any kind of dissolution of this partnership.
And I was looking at the dates. This Turki Al-Sheikh tweet happens just after the last Mark Shapiro public talk that he gave for the
last earnings call where he was promoting this,
and then after he did the JP Morgan conference. So
that's right. Yeah.
So. But this tweet happened after any of that, so everything was normal, at that time, presumably. But yeah, it raises a lot of questions, because the big thing for investors here, who may know the Endeavor story and all the issues that they had with debt and their stock not performing well. Well, TKO is doing really well, and TKO is getting into boxing, but don't worry, it's not going to come with much of any risk, because it's going to all be bankrolled by the Saudi government. So there's nothing to worry about here. But if the Saudi government's not involved, and I don't know how this project is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's one where it's just a very interesting set of circumstances here, and Turki Al-Sheikh, who wields a lot of power in all of these dynamics, and this also coincides with UFC and their run up towards their media rights expiring at the end of this year, and what role Netflix is going to play, what role an ESPN is going to play. And in theory, like, ESPN was getting out of boxing through its Top Rank deal, like, it would leave things open if they wanted to sell something in the US regarding boxing. Like, that does seem to be such a big focus here, is taking these, like, whether it is PBR or AAA, and in this case boxing, and finding a US broadcaster and minimizing, like, the cost that they have to sink into this, whether it's partnering up with Saudi Arabia or taking something that's relatively low risk in terms of AAA that is very much being earmarked towards, how can we sell this in the US more so than a project in Mexico. And
let's really hyperanalyze this Turki Al-Sheikh tweet. be careful here because I don't want to end up in the 2-2 wing of the prison. But the broadcaster, we have not decided yet. I understand he, in a comment before this, suggested that this Canelo Crawford fight would be on pay-per-view. Am I getting this all right? And there's been at least speculation that maybe this TKO Boxing project would have some sort of connection with Netflix. So if he's talking about pay-per-view in an earlier comment, that certainly doesn't sound like Netflix.
No, and in theory, if this date holds up, which I still wonder if that's going to be the case, like what you're going to run pay-per-view head-to-head with the UFC on that night. Like that just seems counterintuitive. I mean, regardless of what crossover you think is there, just from a strategic point of view, it just seems to be a short-sighted one. If we're going to run 2 pay-per-views head-to-head with one another, and we're going to be working together with each other coming out of this.
Yeah, it's a real question that a lot of times they say, well, in earnings calls, don't expect the press questions to be asked, but this is a real business question with something that they very prominently have spoken about, and it is a real part of their outlook. So I do expect eventually we'll get some sort of comments from analysts about this, if nothing else.
Yeah, or at least a Dana White at a press conference. Like I think this is of interest to the media that do show up at these.
Yeah.
All right, let's end off with a couple of ratings notes. We have not got the Saturday night's main event viewership yet. I think we were delayed because of Memorial Day, so that one is still to be determined. We'll see. Was R-Truth a draw? You might have to wait a few more hours for that. But Collision ran last Thursday night, doing 353,000 viewers and a .08, and they had a great start to this show, and then the NBA game began, and you can look at Brandon's chart to know exactly when this NBA game started, because made it very clear that there was a very basketball savvy male audience that was watching the first half hour of Collision, and then they were off to watch the NBA.
Yeah, as soon as it loads here, there we go. It was a dramatic drop off. Had a big start, right? And this was on TBS, so I wonder if there was there like Big Bang Theory that was preceding this. I didn't look. But it does drop really hard around the same time that the Timberwolves and Thunder game began.
And then SmackDown on Friday night, the number has just come in with 1,398,000 viewers and a .33 in the demo. So while they were up 8% in viewership, they dropped 8% in the demo, which was their lowest of the year, second lowest since moving to the USA Network, behind the episode that aired against the undercard of Mike Tyson and Jake Paul last November. And this was up against the Knicks-Pacers game that did about 5.9 million viewers. And yeah, that Knicks-Pacers series, it aired, it was up against Dynamite last Wednesday, SmackDown on Friday, and then the Double or Nothing show on Sunday night. So that is probably going to...
And NXT last night, too. So we'll see how that goes.
That's right, yes. So, and looking ahead to this weekend, if the Pacers eliminate the Knicks tomorrow, then Collision would air in its normal time slot on Saturday. But if they extend it to Saturday, then AEW Collision will air sometime after the playoffs, late Saturday night. So there is a rooting interest for AEW fans to see the Pacers eliminate the Knicks.
Okay. When is the 4-hour block?
The next 2 Wednesdays.
Great. Can't wait.
Yeah, you're going to have to stay up late for those ones.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, we have a 4-hour Fighter Fest and a 4-hour Summer Blockbuster. This seems like quite the test to go 4 hours in the middle of the week. But
more is always better.
Yes. Raw from last Monday on Netflix, 2,700,000 views, 5 million hours viewed, ranked 9th globally. It was ranked in the top 10 in 7 countries, 5th in the U.S., 6th in Canada, with a watch time listed here of 1 hour and 40 minutes. I really need to get onto the Netflix viewing times that they calculate afterwards.
Yes.
This would save me 50 minutes.
We did have a question here. It's being requested that I explain the methodology of my estimates that I make here, which people watching a video, I can show you what it's. This episode would be down year over year from the same week of the prior 2 years. We do have some weeks where I estimate it's above. I've been discussing this. I've had a thrilling conversation with our friend Dave Meltzer involving raw Netflix algebra and things like that. I I don't see it how he does in terms of he thinks that the viewership compared to how it was doing in the United States on the USA Network is way down. It still looks to me like it's roughly the same. There's a lot of estimates and assumptions you can make about what the delayed viewing is that I won't get bogged down into in audio. But I think, based on my estimates, which I'll try to explain in intelligible terms here. I've basically just taken the disclosure that they made about the very first episode, which they did give us a comparable, pretty close to like number for the very first episode, where they say it did live plus same day 2.6 million viewers, and from there I basically extrapolated. Okay, it did 5.9 million through 7. Well, bring it all on down, to the present, and say, well, it's down by this much percent. So I assume that the U.S. live plus same day viewership is down to the same degree. It's basically all I'm doing, except for I am also accounting for the fact that that was video amp, which tends to be, let's say, 8% more generous than Nielsen, and then I just sort of take a median of those two figures, what it would be with and without the 8% adjustment, which is fairly minor. We get to, saying that it looks like 1.6 million viewers is my estimate for what Raw is doing these days. We get as high as 2.1 million, though, for the post-WrestleMania episode. So in the neighborhood of what they were doing in the prior year, again, which is demonstrated for people watching video in this line chart, where there's some zigzag, I think most of these data points are below the same week of the prior year, but we end up with saying that, quarter to date, it is down by 2%. So pretty close to where it was. I get up 10% in Q1, but that's skewed by the really highly viewed premiere episode.
There's definitely an open lane for you to provide this data for all the Netflix programs out there. Like I think you would get a guest spot on The Town if you started that.
But there's not the continuation. What we're trying to do is reconcile this old data from USA Network on cable to whatever it's doing on Netflix. So there's no translation
comparison point
to be made there, I guess.
Well, there you go, everyone. You are all up to date. SmackDown on Friday, by the way, it ranked in one country for Friday's episode, Bolivia.
Wow.
All
Bolivia.
Along. Yeah, ranked 10th. So there you go. That was.
And real quick, before someone asks, I don't deal with the issue that India was added in April, because we saw no noticeable difference when India was added to the Netflix number. India was not there, and then India was there, and there was no noticeable difference in the number. I expected there might be, but as it turns out, maybe just not that many people have Netflix in India, and that is in fact one of the opportunities that WWE provides to Netflix, is that we have a huge WWE audience in India. Maybe we can get people to subscribe. Well, there's nothing there yet to say that I should make an adjustment, which I did consider doing when India was added. So we don't make any sort of change to the formula because of India.
All right, that's going to bring us to an end of the show, but we want to thank all of you for joining us and listening live.
I thought this was going to be like a 2-hour program today.
Well, we're efficient. We are mindful of people's time. So we got through a lot here. Again, going over the latest in the Janel Grant case. John Laurinaitis no longer a defendant. Triller, problems potentially brewing. But hey, if you are optimistic about Triller, 61 cents will get you in on company stock at this point. They're also open to $10 million investments if you're so inclined. And also a big look at WrestleMania, leaving New Orleans, holding out its thumb on the highway, and a Las Vegas
There's breaking news here since we've been on the air. I don't know if you've seen.
I did see this.
And Seagrams have announced that not only is WWE partnering with Zenny Optical, but they are also partnering with Seagram's Escapes Spiked, which is some sort of alcoholic beverage, I assume.
This is alcoholic, okay.
It's spiked, so it's got to be.
Yeah. Great tasting flavored malt beverages.
Seagram's does, right?
Yeah. I mean, don't know if I'd be trying one of these, but that's for you to decide if you want to have a Seagram's Spiked. to go along with your official eyewear of WWE. That's one of the things that has lamented this boom period is the lack of an eyewear sponsor.
This marks WWE's first ever licensed ready-to-drink product. I don't know
what is
that
a
means.
not ready-to-drink product? Like what, an
Zenny
ice
Optical.
cube?
It's not ready to drink. You can't drink
Okay.
Zenny Optical.
Okay, I guess so. Well, there you go.
Didn't they have like branded energy drinks though with C4 or somebody?
They had the Y2 Stinger. You remember that? Yeah,
Sure.
Some wonder. We should definitely do a history of WWE sponsors. That feels like a missed opportunity for a David Bixenspan deep dive. Like the history of WWE's questionable sponsors.
Sounds good.
Okay. We are out of time, everyone. We're here every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Hit subscribe on both of our channels. Like the video. Tell everybody about the greatness that is happening here on a weekly basis. Every Wednesday, 1 Eastern. I'm back tonight with Rewinded Dynamite along with Wei Ting. And then over at postwrestlingcafe.com, where we put out our extra shows each week. Thursday, we are going to be discussing ECW's The Night the Line Was Crossed in February of 1994. Terry Funk, Sabu, and Shane Douglas making history in the ECW arena. Watch an arena full. Imagine Anarchy in the Arena if it was all shot on the hard cam. That's what you get to look forward to from ECW Eastern Championship Wrestling's production value in early 1994. So that is coming your way. Again, postwrestlingcafe.com. Over at WrestleNomics.com, you can subscribe on their Patreon and Substack, and you get exclusive access to Brandon's near daily breaking news, whether it's finding out that your trip to New Orleans needs to be canceled or finding out that Triller is experiencing some increased problems, or what is TKO's strategy? Where is morale within the company? What is their ultimate mandate? Is it to you, the fan? Spoiler, it's not. But Brandon has some great thoughts. Whenever you decide to just throw out like some of your think pieces, Brandon, I always look forward to them.
Oh, well, I'm glad you do. I don't know if everyone does, but you know, there's a certain audience for that.
Patreon.com/WrestleNomics or subscribe on Substack to get more with the great Brandon Thurston. All right, that's it for us. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. We're back next week. Have a great day.